The afternoon sun over Los Angeles International Airport beat down on Gate 147, making the terminal's glass walls shimmer like water. Inside, the hum of rolling suitcases and the gentle chime of boarding announcements set the usual soundtrack for intercontinental departures. Flight Aurora 8, the flagship nonstop to Tokyo run by Skyzen Airways, had begun boarding its first-class cabin. The pre-flight scene looked like a textbook: crisp uniforms, polite nods, perfumed air. Yet beneath that polished choreography waited an encounter that would reorder reputations, reset an industry's moral compass, and leave every witness questioning how power truly works. Vienna Rose McAllister, 18, soft-spoken, hair braided beneath a charcoal hood, barely filled her leather backpack as she stepped onto the jet bridge. To onlookers, she was just another hoodie-clad college kid clutching a tattered paperback. Few knew she was the heir to Aurora Code Technologies, a software empire that powered much of the aviation industry's real-time compliance infrastructure. Fewer still knew that her mother, Dr. Amara Rose McAllister, not only held a controlling stake in Skyzen, but had quietly endowed the airline's civil integrity network, a suite of invisible protocols designed to flag misconduct faster than any human could blink. Vienna preferred anonymity. She loved wandering foreign bookstores, eating street food in places where nobody had ever heard the surname McAllister. But anonymity is fragile when bias decides how it sees you. The flight's purser, Mark Ellis, straight-backed in his navy blazer, watched boarding like a sentry. His eyes stalled on Vienna the moment her sneakers crossed the threshold. He saw the hoodie first, then the dark skin, then the low-slung backpack whose fabric looked more campus than couture. The mental math that followed, too young, too casual, wrong look for seat 1A, was instantaneous, invisible, and lethal to courtesy. "Ticket?" he asked, palm out, voice cool enough to frost glass. Vienna offered the boarding pass with a gentle smile. "Good afternoon." Mark scanned it, lips twitching as though the scanner must be wrong. Seat 1A was the suite with the sliding doors and the memory foam mattress, the seat executives bragged about on LinkedIn. He forced a smile thin enough to snap. "Enjoy your flight," he said, but his tone implied quotation marks around every word. Vienna thanked him, tucked her pass away, and moved down the aisle that still smelled of bergamot wipe-downs. First class was half empty, but Mark followed her like a shadow. He watched as she lifted her bag into the overhead bin unaided. He watched as she buckled in, slid her headphones over her ears, and opened her book, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. He did not offer her the pre-departure jasmine tea. He did deliver glasses to the older white couple in 2C and 2D, joking about how Tokyo in springtime made Kyoto look like Costco. Vienna glanced up, noticed the omission, then tucked her eyes back into the novel. Quiet grace first. Escalation only as last resort. That was her mother's mantra. Boarding finished. The cabin lights dimmed to lavender. Safety demo. Taxi out. Mark passed through with sushi-grade smiles for everyone except Vienna. When he reached her row, he paused, looked at the empty seat beside her, and frowned. A stockbroker-looking man in a seersucker blazer was approaching from the lavatory. "I'd like to switch," the man said, one hand stuffing a Mont Blanc into his pocket. "My colleague's back in 3F, we'd rather sit together." Mark's gaze traveled from the man's Rolex to Vienna's J-Lab earbuds. Something unspoken clicked into place. "Of course," he said. "Miss, would you mind relocating to 3F so Mr. Carlin can enjoy his seat?" Vienna closed the book. "I'd rather stay in the seat I was ticketed for." 3F is still first class, Mark replied, voice dipped in honey that barely hid the iron underneath. "Identical service." "Identical except it isn't my seat," Vienna said. Her tone remained mellow, each syllable enunciated with a calmness that seemed to annoy Mark more than any tantrum might have. He drew a breath, perhaps surprised she would not concede. The broker took 2 steps back, feigning sudden fascination with his phone. Mark leaned in, lowering his voice to a hush sharp enough to cut cloth. "Let's not cause a scene before we even leave the ground." Vienna smiled politely. "Then let's not," she said, and reopened her book. The engines revved. Wheels left asphalt. Climbed to cruising altitude. For 40 silver-lit minutes, the indigo vastness outside painted the cabin windows, and only the white noise of jet turbines disturbed the hush. Mark returned with the dinner menus. Each passenger received a glossy booklet outlining omake selections. Vienna looked up, but Mark's hand skirted her tray table as though she were transparent. She waited. He bypassed her again with the pre-meal ashibori towels. The older couple noticed. The broker noticed. They said nothing. Silence can be cowardice disguised as etiquette. Cloud tops rolled like glaciers beneath them when Vienna felt a sudden jolt. The broker's elbow as he lurched sideways, spilling a splash of sparkling water onto her leggings. "Watch where you," Mark barked, but the sentence ended focused on Vienna, not the broker. Vienna dabbed at the droplets with napkins she had to reach across the aisle to obtain herself. Mark didn't move. Eventually he toothed under his breath and stalked forward. From rows behind, a phone screen glowed. Someone had begun recording. Half an hour later came dessert service, or would have, had Vienna received dinner at all. Mark stepped to her row with a silver tray of matcha mochi. Without a word, he set it down on the side credenza. Odd, since her table was stowed. Vienna folded her pages, looked up, and pressed the call button. The chime pinged overhead. Mark pivoted like a marionette yanked by strings. He approached, clipped a smile in place. "I think my meal was skipped," Vienna said evenly. "I'm afraid we're out of the vegetarian entree," he answered, though she had not requested vegetarian. "We have assorted nuts." Vienna kept her gaze level. "The menu lists a grilled Niagara sea bass." "I'm not vegetarian." Mark's brows knit. Irritation shadowed across his jaw. He leaned closer, voice low but dripping. "Listen, young lady, first class is still a privilege. We'll see what we can scrounge, but patience would be appreciated." He turned to leave. Vienna's pulse throbbed in her ears. For a moment, she considered firing off the retort that it was not a privilege but a purchased service. Instead, she thumbed open her phone and navigated to an unlabeled gray and white icon that looked like a compass rose. The login screen flashed, recognized her face, and vanished behind cascading data lines. She placed the phone face down. Minutes later, Mark returned, but now the broker stood with him. "She can have my food," the broker said to Mark, a brittle attempt at magnanimity. Mark ignored him. "Actually," Mark told Vienna, "the captains requested you relocate now. They need weight balance corrected forward." Vienna's laugh, soft and incredulous, broke free. "The aircraft's trim is computer calculated. My 60 kilos won't destabilize a dream-wide 890, she said, reciting model specs she'd memorized at 15 while helping her mother debug autopilot algorithms. Mark's nostrils flared. "Stand up," he ordered, voice now a bark. He reached for her arm. The broker's gaze darted, passengers stiffened. Before his fingers clasped her sleeve, Vienna pulled back, palms open in a pacifying gesture. Mark's balance shifted, and with a half-stumble, he struck her headphone cable, yanking the earpiece from her ear. Frustration flashed into something darker. He slapped the dangling cable away. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone with a crack audible across the cabin. Gasps detonated in rows around them. The older woman in 2C clapped a hand to her mouth. Somewhere a child called out from business class. "Mommy, what was that?" Vienna's head snapped sideways. Pain blossomed hot. A hush fell, thick as fog. Slowly she turned back, eyes clear, expression unreadable. She lifted her phone, double-tapped a button, and said, "Mom, I'm triggering Nova Protocol." No one but the hidden software heard her mother's voice. A calm British-Nigerian lilt. Reply. Copy. Recording uplink activated, sweetheart. The call is auto-muted. Mark's arrogance shriveled into confusion. He sensed something had shifted but couldn't name it. He felt. Then, rather than heard the subtle slowing of engines as the aircraft's autopilot accepted an instruction Mark had nothing to do with. Passengers looked up, sensing a change in pitch. Inside the flight deck, the electronic flight bag dinged with a message labeled Priority Alpha, immediate grounding. The captain, veteran pilot Yuko Tanaka, furrowed her brow. The data packet cited CN bias incident threshold exceeded, with a digital signature from the airline's executive compliance server. Tanaka had never seen the system trigger mid-ocean. It carried the force of a regulatory mandate, overriding even the airline's CEO. The nearest suitable diversion airport was Anchorage. She keyed the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an unexpected system advisory, we will be making a precautionary landing in Anchorage. Please remain seated." Panic flickered through first class. Whispers, the flutter of phone cameras lifting. Mark's face blanched. He tried to step toward the cockpit, but the forward galley door had auto-locked, a security feature coded by, ironically, Aurora Code engineers. Vienna lowered her phone. Her cheeks still burned, but her voice was steady when she addressed Mark. "You may want to call your union representative." He opened his mouth, closed it, then backed away as though the carpet beneath him had turned to ice. 2 hours later, the plane rolled onto Anchorage's snow-rimmed runway under Arctic twilight. Emergency vehicles lined the taxiway, though no fire had been reported. The captain's voice remained calm, but her gaze stayed fixed on the compliance report scrolling across her second screen. Timestamped footage from Vienna's front-facing camera, flight deck audio overlays. Even Mark's personnel file flagged with prior bias complaints quietly settled out of court. At the gate, a boarding bridge latched with a thunk. Mark found himself flanked by two uniformed agents from the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division, a unit so new most airlines didn't know it existed. They escorted him down the aisle past rows of hushed passengers, whose phones filmed like silent jurors. The older couple in 2C and 2D lowered their eyes. The broker watched, eyes wide, as the man he tried to impress was led away in cuffs. Vienna remained seated until last. The captain appeared at her suite door, cap in hand. "Miss McAllister," she said, voice trembling with an admixture of apology and admiration. "We have transportation for you to the terminal. Your mother is on her way." Vienna nodded, gathered her backpack, and stepped into the aisle. As she walked aft, passengers parted like waves opening for a ship's bow. Some whispered apologies, others thank yous. She accepted none, offered none. Dignity stayed silent. The Anchorage terminal smelled of cedar and jet fuel. Snowflakes whirled across the tarmac like bright confetti. At gate 10 stood Dr. Amara Rose McAllister, winter coat belted tight, expression unreadable beneath the fluorescent lights. She did not rush forward. Instead, she held her ground, eyes on her daughters, as if weighing whether to console or to commend. When Vienna reached her, Amara laid a gloved hand lightly against the reddened cheek. "Pain?" she asked. "Stings," Vienna admitted. "Good," Amara said softly. "Then you'll remember exactly why we built Nova." Vienna exhaled. The weight of restraint, finally allowed to slip, made her shoulders sag a degree. A press gaggle had already formed behind security lines, cameras hoisted, microphones craning. Yet none dared shout questions just yet. The scene felt like a cathedral at midnight, something sacred about to unfold. Amara led Vienna to a private lounge where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the frozen ramp. A solitary seal plain lumbered like a ghost. Inside sat 3 senior executives from Skyzen, summoned by the protocol. Their faces were ash-gray. They rose in unison as the McAllisters entered. Amara motioned for them to sit. "The incident was isolated," the CEO began, voice quavering. "We apologize on behalf of the company." "This wasn't isolated," Amara interrupted. "It was the 3rd complaint against Mr. Ellis in 14 months. Your triage system hid the others behind NDAs, but Nova doesn't forget." Vienna watched, silent. Her mother's poise was surgical. She dissected excuses, layer by layer, revealing the rot of pattern beneath. The executives wilted. "We'll fire him immediately," the CVO said. "You just did," Amara replied. "But termination is symptom control. We're rewriting policy tonight. Every cabin crew will undergo bias training with measurable outcomes. All settlements made under forced confidentiality will be revisited. And I want passenger civil integrity dashboards integrated into the Skyzen app within 6 weeks, transparent to shareholders." The CFO swallowed. "That will be costly." "Compared to what?" Amara asked. "Lawsuits. Brand erosion." My silence. He looked away. One executive tried a new tack. "Dr. McAllister, you and your daughter have endured a terrible ordeal. Could we offer?" "Don't say compensation," Amara warned. "Money is the easiest apology because it costs the least dignity." They nodded. She dismissed them with a glance at her watch. The meeting ended. Executives shuffled out into the polar night, their breath visible in the glass reflection. Vienna and her mother were alone. Only then did Amara pull her daughter into an embrace, fierce and brief. "I thought I programmed for every scenario," she murmured. "Never imagined it'd be my child to trigger it first." Vienna pressed her forehead to her mother's shoulder. "If I hadn't, someone else would have eventually, and maybe they'd have lacked proof." They pulled apart. Amara's eyes shone, not with tears, but with something brighter, pride forged in urgency. "Come," she said. "We have a town hall to plan. Anchorage wants to know why a jet full of rich travelers just landed on their doorstep." They walked toward the conference center, boots echoing on polished terrazzo. Word of mouth travels faster than any jet. Social feeds already flooded with 30-second clips of Mark's march down the aisle. Hashtags #Nova Protocol and #Dignity in Flight, trending worldwide. Commentators hailed Vienna as a quiet revolutionary. Conspiracy theorists spun webs about corporate coups. Somewhere, far south beneath a different sky, Mark sat in a windowless room, facing investigators equipped with playback of his own voice, his own hand raised, the digital mirror he could no longer avoid. For weeks later, Vienna stood at Skyzen's Tokyo headquarters beside Captain Tanaka as they inaugurated the Aurora Integrity Center, a command hub where passenger grievances, crew conduct, and algorithmic audits converged in real time. The ceremony live-streamed to millions. Reporters asked what she felt that night in the cabin after the slap. Vienna looked into the camera, eyes steady. I felt a history shift, she said. Not because someone hit me, but because I now knew a system existed that could not be bribed into silence. The moment we realize accountability is faster than prejudice, we change the definition of power. Blogs would immortalize the quote. Students would tattoo the words. Mark's trial, eventually, would become a footnote. But Vienna's act of silent courage, choosing the calm invocation of code over the roar of anger, lingered. In quiet moments, she still recalled the sting on her cheek, the way a slap can echo through architecture, through corporate boardrooms, through the algorithmic guts of an industry. Pain can be instruction. Memory can be a map. And dignity, when wielded precisely, becomes the lever that moves worlds. Years later, when historians traced the pivot point where aviation's courtesy became accountable, they did not begin with laws or lawsuits. They began with a young woman reading Invisible Man at 38,000 feet, with snow clouds whitening a midnight Alaskan sky, with protocols waiting dormant until summoned by courage. They began with Vienna Rose McAllister, who taught a global audience that invisible does not mean powerless, and that quiet strength, once awakened, makes the very heavens reroute their paths.